What is up, YouTube? We got so much stuff to get into today. I usually go pretty in-depth in these videos, but because there is so many over-the-top complicated mechanics to this build, I'm going to skip over a lot of the light stuff and just leave the build link in the description down below. And we're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes of why this build is so broken and why we're going to be doing a lot of things that are not going to be very obvious at first. For instance, we're using multiple skills that aren't going on our skill tree, but we're still learning them because we want other benefits from them. And we'll go over exactly why we do all these things, what kind of gear we need, and how we can really break the game with these new hearts. So let's just jump right into it. First off, we're going to take a look at, obviously, you know, the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that the Barber heart is pretty broken. I mean, even the name, I think, was supposed to be barbed heart. But the effect on it is there's a lot of mythos to this thing where a lot of rogues think that it's killing their damage and they're not getting any of their lucky hit procs and this and that. But that just isn't true. All those things are happening. They're just happening behind the scenes. And what's really going on is the barbed heart or Barber heart is stealing all of those effects and damage, piling them all together, amplifying them by whatever percentage the heart that you have is, and then spitting them back out from whoever's holding the Barber's heart as one big lump sum. So if you have 3 rogues in a party and they're all dropping poison effects on the mob and all that damage is disappearing, it's because the other guy in the party is using a barbed heart and he's sucking in all of their damage, multiplying it by 15% or whatever the heart is, and then spitting it back out in one lump sum under his own damage numbers. And that's going to be a big part of what we're doing, but the majority of this build is just sheer broken mechanics. We're using a whole bunch of effects from aspects and the Great Cron Stone, or Great Staff of Crone, whatever, that are actually stacking on top of skills that aren't even on our hotbar. And we'll get into exactly why those are. So first off, let's go over the gear. The gear that you use really doesn't matter a whole lot. As with any build in the game, the more late game content you're trying to push, the closer to tier 100 content you're trying to push, the more defense you want to put on your gear. The more you're trying to speed run, the more offense you want to put on your gear. So you'll see that my gear has a good mix of both. Mainly what I'm doing is trying to take the added skill ranks as my offense and then putting the rest of my gear into defense. And that's so that I can do both without swapping my gear because I'm incredibly lazy. So let me go full screen here and we'll start going over the individual gear pieces here, because the aspects are a lot more important than the gear stats. So first thing we have is Earthen Bulwark Extended, and this is from the Mending Stone aspect, and this is going to allow our Earthen Bulwark to keep rebuilding itself, similar to how like a Bone Storm shield works, with the more earth damage we do. And that's really important because we're actually going to convert most of our kit into earth damage. The next thing we're going to do is, like any other build that you'll ever see on YouTube, at least at this meta, we're going to throw Disobedience on for the extra armor boost. It's just crucial to every build. This one is going to be another one of those really crucial skills. We're going to add Landslide to our creeper with this aspect of Subterranean, which means that little vine guy that's going around in circles, now instead of just snaring and entangling the enemies, he's going to spit out a big old earthquake around us every time he comes up. Next, we're going to add more defense. Again, the aspect of Might is just one of those aspects that almost every build is going to need. Then we're going to throw on movement speed while unstoppable, because in this build, with the aspect of mending stone, we're pretty much unstoppable 24/7. We're almost never not unstoppable, so we'll just have increased movement speed all the time, which is really good for pushing. You could put ranks of earth skills while fortified there. That's another good one, but we're looking for the movement speed out of it. Great Staff of Crone is really important, but we'll come back to it in a moment here. This one is another really important aspect. Nature's Fury key passive triggers a free skill. Your non-ultimate cooldowns of the opposite type are reduced by whatever many seconds. And the reason this is so important is because we're going to be using one type of skill to not only trigger the cooldown and reset on the other skills, but we're actually going to be popping skills that we don't even have learned in this kit. So, you know, you have 6 skills on your cooldown, on your hotbar, but throughout this kit, you're going to see that we're actually using close to, what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 10 or 11 skills, even though we can only have 6 on our hotbar. And this is where I'm putting the barbed heart. You can put the hearts on any order, but you are going to need a pink and a blue slot, and then whatever color slot for your barbed. The barbed heart is, again, one of those huge things that we're going to come back to in a moment and explain exactly how the damage on it works. But it is very important for this build. The next one, I have ranks of Envenom on here. If you can get them, great. If not, don't worry about it. This is another really important aspect here. Aftershock is going to give us Earth Pillars every time we use Trample. Earth Pillars of Landslide every time we use Trample. So that's the second way that we can trigger Landslide without ever actually touching the skill off of our hotbar so far. And basically, yeah, it's going to cover the entire screen in Landslide Pillars every time we use Trample, which is really nice. Which brings us to the next one that's going to double all of our Landslide abilities. Oh wait, I think I had those backwards. Yeah, Landslide's Pillars strike a second time. So actually swap that around. So this one is going to trigger the Landslide on our Trample, the Trampled Earth. Aftershock is going to be the one that basically doubles the damage in our entire kit. And that's going to apply not just to the skill itself, but every time we get a Landslide from Trample, it's going to double that with a follow-up Landslide. Every time we get a Landslide from our Creeper, it's going to double that and follow up with another Landslide. Every time we get a Landslide from our Nature's Fury skill, it's going to follow that up. Every time we use Landslide from our hotbar, it's going to follow that up. And it really is just doubling the damage of our whole kit, and then a little bit of percentage on top of that. So going back into the Cron Staff here, or the Great Staff of Crone, basically what this is going to do is give us a huge amount of ranks in our Claw skill. So many that we can actually double hit on top of double hitting with this Claw skill, and really reset our cooldowns almost instantly. I'll explain a little bit more on how that works in a moment here, but one of the other big things it's going to do is turn our Claw into a Storm skill and cast Storm Strike with it. And the reason that's so big is because we're going to be using a few other tricks here to basically ensure that we're getting werewolf damage on everything and playing a lot of cooldown reset off of our spirit boons. So for our spirit boons, we're going to grab reduce damage from elites, obviously is a big one, from deer, or whichever one that is. For our second one here, we're going to grab attack speed and critical strike damage. And those two will come into play with the Claw that we were just talking about. This Claw is going to be so fast, it's ridiculous. We're going to be resetting our cooldowns with it constantly. But then we're going to get Pack Leader so that our Creeper also has a chance to reset itself. And because it's double hitting, that's going to actually happen a lot. You'll see why in a moment here again. And then for our last boon, we're going to get the Call Before the Storm, because again, we want the chance of reducing our cooldowns as often as possible, because we're going to be spamming our skills here. Now let's get into how exactly all of that works. I'm not going to do the build by build from the ground up. What I would recommend is looking up like Moxie's leveling guide or something, following that if you're under level 50, and then once you hit level 50, immediately dump all your points into this build here, because it's going to be a lot stronger. So we are getting Storm Strike and we are getting Claw, and the reason is because of that Crone Staff giving us the Storm Strike every time we use Claw. We not only want to get the benefits of Wild Claw attacking twice, but every time that Wild Claw does attack twice, we're going to be triggering our Storm Strikes via the Crone Staff, and then we're also going to be getting these benefits of Storm Strike making things vulnerable. You could even have it chain additional targets, which I'll talk about why you might want to switch to that eventually once you get your runes updated, and why I'm not switched to it now when we get to the Paragon. But next up, you're going to go down the tree, grab as much landslide as you can, as this is kind of the lifeblood of our build, even though we never really use it from the hotbar. We still are going to put it on our hotbar, because what's going to happen is once we get Primal Landslide, we'll basically have infinite crit strike with landslide abilities by hitting AoEs constantly and building these Terramotes up, as they call them, which guarantee a critical strike. And that only works if you have landslide on your hotbar, which is really the only reason I have it on my hotbar at all. You don't ever need to actually use it from your hotbar. But you do want those critical strikes, so put it on your hotbar anyways. Then we're going to get Predatory Instinct, just so that we can, get ourselves a little bit of extra crit damage. Crit Strike is going to be the main focus for stats in this build. And then we're going to add our movement speed while in werewolf form, because we will be in werewolf form almost all the time, at least to swipe and go back to human form. And that will last for 3 seconds after werewolf form, so you'll always have this movement speed buff up. Next, we're going to get Earth and Bulwark. This is one of the other main skills of our build, and because we're going to keep this up 24/7, we also want to keep the innate Bulwark on, which will give us increased damage when having our Bulwark up. Basically, it just pops in people's faces when they're attacking us. We're not going to get this because we don't really need the extra Fortify. We're going to be 100% fortified all the time anyways. And I know there's a lot of builds out there that get all of these other Fortify skills later on down in the tree, and that is why we won't be getting them, because we're going to overkill our Fortify without having any of those skills. That being said, though, we are going to get Ancestral Fortitude, which increases our resistance a little bit, but mainly we're just getting it so that we can get Vigilance, which gives us more damage reduction after using Bulwark. Which is why we, even though this may already be off of cooldown and still be up, we're going to pop it again anyways and put it back on cooldown just so we can keep getting this Vigilance buff. So don't forget about that. Just because your Bulwark might last forever doesn't mean you shouldn't refresh it anyways. Moving down the list, Creeper is going to be our main pet damage, I guess. I don't know what you would call it, but we're not really getting damage from the Creeper. So it shows 5 of 5 here, but that's only because of my gear. You only need 1 point in Creeper. Same thing up here, you see 7 of 5, but 6 of those points are from my gear. I only have 1 point in here, and you should too. Here in Landslide, you do want to max out, because we just want to get as much damage out of it as we can. And in Earth and Bulwark, we're going to max out, because again, it's going to bring our cooldowns down so that we can keep it up 24/7. And the more we refresh it, the more we get Vigilance. Now, this one, I'm only putting 1 point into it because it's not creeper that's actually giving us the damage on creeper. It is the landslide that we've added to creeper with our aspects. Now, that is the other reason why we're not going for the poison damage on creeper, and instead we're going for the crit chance when an enemy is already strangled by poison creeper. Because remember, all of our landslide abilities are hitting twice. That means our landslided poison creeper is also hitting twice. So the first time it hits, it's going to strangle all of the enemies. Then it's going to automatically hit again and give itself this extra chance to crit. And because of that extra chance to crit, if you remember, our boons here are giving it a chance to completely reset itself when it does crit. So we're going to get a lot of poison creeper resets, which is going to give us a lot of extra landslides. Moving down the tree, we are going to get hurricane, and we're going to get enhanced hurricane and savage hurricane, but we're never going to put this skill on our hotbar. And I know that sounds silly, but because we have the Nature's Fury triggering free skills, which we'll get to again later on. But basically what Nature's Fury does is whenever you use a skill of one element in a tree, it has a chance to trigger a skill of the opposite element in the same tree. So defensive skills or these skills, so forth and so forth and so forth. And that goes all the way back to even our basic attack. So we're claw storming to get this, and because we're hitting this, we're also going to get this, and so forth and so forth. And we're going to end up casting Hurricane without ever trying to cast Hurricane because we're casting Trample. And Trample is now an Earth skill with our aspect. And that is the only reason that I have any points into it, is because, yes, I could get by with my gear doing all the trample for me, but only by having points into it will my nature skill here, what is it called, Nature's Fury, actually trigger the opposite effect, which in this case is going to be Hurricane every time I use trample. And because we're triggering Hurricane, we want to get the extra damage reduction that Hurricane can offer. But we're never, again, going to put it on our hotbar. Then we're going to get some passives here. Storm skills have a chance to make enemies vulnerable. Not really important because we'll be using Exploit more than likely. But then we want Endless Tempest, which increases the duration of not only Hurricane, but our Cataclysm, which is going to be very important in a minute here. So just to run through the rest of these real quick, I have 1 point into Trample just so that we make sure that we get the procs off of it. And then our passives here are going to be Crushing Earth. Again, just makes Earth skills deal more damage when enemies are CC'd. And Safeguard. Safeguard makes critical strikes with Earth skills fortify us based on part of our base life. And this right here, with how often we're going to be critting in this build because of all of our multi-hit abilities, is going to be more than enough fortify to where we don't need this. We don't need the other fortify skills at all. We're going to be 100% fortified with just this ability. And then down at the bottom of the tree, we have Neurotoxin so that poison enemies are slowed, but more so that we can get to these two skills. And Venom is one of our biggest damage boosters. You and your damage companions gain a 60% bonus critical strike damage against poisoned enemies. So as soon as Poison Creeper starts poisoning things, our damage just ramps up by 60%. It's massive. And we're going to add Toxic Claws so that our werewolf skills all now deal part of their base damage as poisoning over 4 seconds, which again goes back to our claws constantly poisoning all of our enemies. Moving on, for our ultimate, we're going to get Cataclysm because it lasts longer than any of the other skills, but also because it makes our lucky hit chance insane. So while we have Cataclysm running, our lucky hit chance moves all the way up to 95%. And That's going to give us more procs on our poison creeper, which is going to give us more chances for the poison creeper lucky hit critical, which is going to reset our poison creeper constantly and give us constant landslides again. In the beginning of my build, leveling up, I used Defiance and Natural Disaster like Moxie does, but eventually you'll outgrow those and you'll want to move into Quick Shift and Heightened Senses for the additional damage when you're into a werewolf or werebear, because we're constantly going to be bouncing back and forth on those. And finally, our last skill, most important skill, Nature's Fury. This is what's going to give us a free storm skill of the same category. So casting an earth skill has a 30% chance to trigger a free storm skill of the same category. In addition, casting a storm skill has a 30% chance to trigger a free earth skill of the same category. So those being opposites, remember here, this is now an earth skill because of our aspect. So every time we cast that, it's going to cast a storm skill of the same category, which is going to be our hurricane. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Now it kind of comes to fruition here. Every time an enemy gets hit with Earthen Bulwark, there is a chance you could cast Cyclone Armor. So maybe you want to learn that instead. You can't do it if you don't know the base skill. Maybe you want to do that instead of Trample. I personally like this combination a lot better. It's a lot more effective. You get the double whammy out of it. Whereas if you went this route instead of Trample, you're going to lose this as well. But it's completely up to you. I know I've even thought about taking like 1 point out of here and getting Tornado on there just so that I throw out more tornadoes. But you're going to do that anyways because of your Cataclysm and your Trample constantly proccing and things like that. So it just really doesn't make any sense to do it. This gives you enough free storms to qualify you as a Storm God build. For the Paragon, I'm only level, 79 on this build, and I'm already doing tier 100s. And this is where my Paragon is kind of going at the moment. But this will probably all change as I move towards level 100 and as I get some of these glyphs more leveled up. But right now we're starting off with Exploit in our first slot because we want that free vulnerable status. Now this build has so many ways to make enemies vulnerable. You could throw something like Territorial in there and just get a huge defense boost off of it instead. Also one way to go, but we're throwing our Exploit in there, getting all the dexterity just so that we can trigger the vulnerable off of it. We don't really care about the raw damage off of Exploit. In most of my builds, you'll see that I kind of max out going off of the raw damage bonus for having all the dex in the tree and so forth. But on this build, we're going to be a lot more spread out because what we're really aiming for in the Paragons is defensive nodes. We have so much offense, it's ridiculous. It's the defensive nodes that we're really aiming for. So we come up the tree, we get poison resistance, but mainly we get armor. We get all the armor nodes we can. Then we go over here, we grab Heightened Malice. Again, you get a huge poison damage from Poison Creeper all the time, so now you just deal more damage like a madman. This is our first tree because we get a huge damage bonus out of it right away, and we start piling on our armor. As we move up the tree, we're going to start getting a lot of nodes that will give us nearby bonuses. So like here we're going Fang and Claw because it grants a bonus to all the magic nodes available. And if you look around the edge of this tree, there is a ton of magic nodes available here that are going to give us more damage reduction for enemies that are poisoned, and our enemies are always poisoned. Here is an important part of this build. You're actually going to want to come up first to get this tree here. This is the Inner Beast tree. And, oh, sorry, I should have mentioned, yeah, this is the Heightened Malice tree. But you're actually going to want to come up to get the Inner Beast tree first. And then after that, get your glyph in there like I've done here. Here we're getting the protector, again, just because we want the rare nodes in range to have more bonus. We're getting massive armor bonuses for that. But then come down here and get a separate tree first. And the reason that the tree order matters is because the bonuses required on your legendary nodes, and your rare nodes, like these intelligence bonus here, are going to amplify each new tree you add. So instead of, what is this here? We'll look at this one. Instead of 350 intelligence, if I got this tree first and then this one, that would be requiring us to have 440 intelligence. You see how that works? Because this tree came first, it requires less bonus stats than this. And that's really why we're doing it. These ones aren't as important, whereas we really want to get the bonus armor off of these. So get this tree first, then come down here and get the Thunderstruck tree. Get it mainly for all this crit damage, which I'll explain why crit damage is so important to us later, and all this, again, extra defense. We really like defense, and all of the enemies are vulnerable, so now we're getting damage reduction from vulnerable enemies to all of them. I've socketed it with Shapeshifter here to give us a bonus to all of the rare nodes, which is proccing off of Hubris here. That will give us a bonus to damage reduction from all vulnerable targets. Now keep in mind, my glyphs are only level 15 so that I can get the maximum range. You'll end up with a lot bigger bonus on these things once you level your glyphs up to 21. But now that you have this tree as your second tree, we're going to be branching off of this tree in every single direction. And I'll have the full build guide on the other page. But because this one came second, it's going to make all these other trees that we go to a lot cheaper. And we're going to be able to actually hit all of the bonuses on here as we cross over to get out of this tree. And again, I'll have the full Paragon guide on the YouTube video. I usually put them in the Discord, but I'll put it on the video for this one, because this one is really complicated, and it's not the Paragon guide that makes it over the top complicated. It's all of these mechanics here, as I pointed out earlier, like having Storm Strike and not using it, having Hurricane and not using it, because now our Wolf Claw is using Storm Strike and our Trample is using Hurricane, and so forth. That is the more complicated part of the build. Now, the other complicated part of the entire game right now is the Barbed Heart. No one understands what the Barber Heart does. Everyone has different opinions, but I can tell you after doing a lot of testing, pretty much exactly what it does. Once you hit the enemy with a critical hit, all of the damage that that enemy receives over the next time period, 4 to 2 seconds, as this Barber Heart states, all of the damage in that time period is then absorbed by the enemy and unleashed as an AoE explosion to all the enemies around them, as well as themselves. And it's also amplified before it's released, which is why it's okay that we're stealing everyone else's damage. Because when the party starts doing their hardest hits and damage and panicking that they're not doing their damage to the enemy, we're taking that damage and amplifying it by 14% multiplicative. So we're not doing any harm to what they're doing. We're actually amplifying it. And then we get to look really cool because we're the ones who hit for 100 mil. That being said, there is some stipulation as to whether you want to get a minimum heart roll, which would be 4 seconds, or a maximum heart roll, which would go down to 2 seconds. And the reason that that is considered the maximum and 4 is considered the minimum is because a lot of enemies will not live through the entire damage period. 4 seconds is a long time for an enemy to stay alive when you're beating the shit out of it with our massive landslide kit. So having less time on your Barbed Heart I'm going to keep calling it barbed heart because it just makes more sense. Having less time on your barbed heart means you will proc that explosion more often and fulfill that massive damage over time rather than doing it all at once. Now, if you're fighting, like, say, Uber Lilith or a large boss monster, having a longer timed barbed heart, closer to 4 seconds, might not be the worst thing because you're allowing everybody to feed you that damage for the full 4 seconds before you explode on them and amplify all that damage back. It's really about what kind of content you want to fulfill. You'll see in some of the clips, or maybe you already did, depending on how I edit this, that I actually abused a rogue's damage to shred a tier 100 boss monster at level 77. And I did that with a longer heart so that I could store up more of his damage. But for pushing content, it's great. For speed running, you're probably going to want a lower timer so that you can pop that more often as you run through the mobs and shit on everything. So that being said, we will jump into some gameplay and take a look at how it works. But keep in mind, like I said about the barbed heart, it is going to play very differently whether you are playing solo or whether you are in a group. In a group, you'll be sucking up everybody's damage and spitting it out a little harder. Solo, you will only be amplifying your own damage. So when you're playing solo, it might even look like you're lagging because the enemy won't be taking any damage. And then all of a sudden, he'll take a massive chunk of damage. Whereas when you're playing in a group, you probably won't even notice that because there's so many different sources of damage, and maybe other people have barbed hearts, which can kind of overlap with each other. And if you ever do get a rogue on your team that's complaining that you're breaking all of his damage mechanics, tell him to use a barbed heart too and shut up. Okay, I forgot to mention 2 other pretty important parts of the build. They're not super crucial, but they do synergize with our build better than anything else, so I figured I'd throw those in there as well. One is the brutal heart that I have on is actually sucking up 20% of all incoming damage, basically 20% damage reduction right in the heart itself, and then it does pump out some pretty nice damage, which, you know, it doesn't hurt, but it's not why we're using this. We're mainly using it for the damage reduction. And the other one is this heart here, Inexorable Force, which pulls enemies from a massive distance all around us, directly on top of us, right where we're doing all of our poison creepers and landslides and so forth. So I figured those were definitely worth mentioning because I know someone's going to ask what the other 2 hearts I use are. And you can swap these out, but these are the 2 that I found that synergize best with this build. Honorable mentions would be like the Caged Heart of Tempting Fate if you have to use an orange heart for some reason. But the amount of damage that you're adding, I felt like didn't really outweigh the amount of damage that you're taking away. Because while it does amplify your crit damage, which is great for building up more damage on the Barber Heart, it takes away some of your regular non-crit damage. And that damage could be going towards the Barber Heart as well. And I felt like it didn't really outweigh the amount of damage that you lose by gaining a little bit of crit strike. So wanted to mention those. Now let's get back into the gameplay. Alright guys, so we're here at Siret's Lair, or whatever the heck it's called. We're just going to, you know, get right into beating up some baddies here. I'm going to use this dungeon because it's one of the more popular ones that people use for EXP grinding. And then I'll have some gameplay of some higher tier content all the way up to tier 100. But we're just going to get right into it. Don't hold back. Go all in. And you can see our Barber's heart already just kicking ass for us. We don't even need to hang out. We could just go, go, go. Looks like we do have a Nightmare Portal. I didn't really check. And these mobs are, what, over level 100, and I'm still level 79. So you can see how easily we just fly through this content. And there's no real rhyme or reason to the skill order, unlike a lot of these more complicated builds. The most complicated thing here is the setup. After that, you know, you just kind of use whatever you got available. So we're going to jump into the big boy part of this. Obviously these monsters do a lot of poison damage, so you kind of want to stay moving a little bit. But that's fine. Oh, I got leveled up. Nice. Even with the poison damage, once we get our bulwark back up, it's going to knock out most of that poison damage for us. So I'm not gonna do too much of the kill everything farm. I think I kind of demonstrated that you could do that. I'm just gonna show you the speed of which we're clearing. You can see my things are still killing stuff back there. Now these will stack with the Barber heart, but it'll probably slow us down more than it'll help us. So we're just gonna go kill everything here. I'm gonna show you how quick you can solo pretty much any content. I mean, I could push for something a little harder than this, but I think you get the idea. I'm using the poison damage here because that's honestly one of our biggest enemies, as it eats through our shields. Most enemies won't have that option. And there you see the Barber heart just putting in work. It looks like something's not taking very much damage, and then that heart goes off, and boom, you know. So, like there, you see it still knocking people out way back there. We're not going to do the event. I mean, I'll show you we could knock it out pretty easily. We're not going to do that. We're just going to fly through this. We're looking for a boss fight, right? We're looking for a boss fight as quick as we can here. Massive movement speed. Just trucking along. There we go. Now we'll pop our ult. Pull everything into us. Make sure we stay moving here. And there you see just the sheer destruction of what this build is capable of. Out of our way, we got shit to do. Ooh, we will kill these, because, you know, elites give great XP. Why not, right? And yeah, don't even worry about your health too much. As soon as you pop that bulwark back up, it's all coming back. That's just all the poison damage. I hate poison dungeons. I really do. Everything likes to explode on death for you. But everyone loves this one, so we'll use it. Did I come from this way? I'm being big smart right now. Big movement speed. Even with me being slow and not the brightest at times. You can see how we have pretty much emptied these tunnels, and now we can just go where we want. Oh, here was our event. Look. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I miss it again? No. Excuse us, coming through. Just using this for movement speed. I don't even need to kill anything with it. It's only going to slow us down right here. Just stay moving. Easy peasy. So now we can go talk to, you know, the queen bee, so to speak. And, no, spider. Spooter. She's dead soon anyways. Probably that. So again, you see how her health looked like it wasn't budging, and then big damage. Boom. Absolutely shredding these dungeons way above our level. And, you know, that's pretty much it. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys hanging out. Be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Comment too if you want to. Until next time, take it easy. You still here, huh? You lost? Oh, I know. You're looking for the website because you wanted some artwork. It's right up at the very top of the page there. No? No, that wasn't it. Maybe you're looking for the Twitch website. Okay, it's going to be over on the right. The video might have popped up by now, so you might have to rewind. That wasn't it either. Listen, I'm not really sure how to help you. Why don't you join the Discord, rewind the video, and you'll see it right behind the pop-up.